Deebo Samuel has been traded. Matthew Stafford is staying in LA. We are a week away from free agency, and we are on YouTube as well. NFL Spotlight starts now. Welcome in. It is the Monday, March 3 edition of the NFL Spotlight Show, our very first episode where we are on YouTube as well. If you're listening on your podcast platforms, thank you so much. Give us a subscribe on YouTube as well. It would be greatly appreciated moving forward every single day. For the show here, we're going to be on YouTube as well. And we are now exactly 1 week away from the legal tampering period in the NFL, aka free agency. That is when teams are officially allowed to start negotiating and agreeing to terms with impending free agents. It's going to get very, very crazy around the NFL. It already was crazy, of course. Over the weekend, there were a lot of things going on. Ben Allen, you're here on the screen on YouTube. It's pretty cool that we're officially here on YouTube. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm good, man. I'm really excited. We had people in the comments asking, like, you know what? It's great here on Twitter. You guys should still keep watching us on Twitter. You should keep listening on all the audio platforms. But it's great to be on YouTube. You guys can click around. We're going to have some other stuff that comes up here. But you know what? With all this going on, we really got to get into the news. And it was a big weekend for news. And nothing was bigger than what we saw coming out of San Francisco with the trade of Deebo Samuel to the Washington Commanders for a 2025 fifth-round pick. Of course, a big part of this trade and the reason why it happened is the 49ers are trying to clear some cap space. The return was indicative of that. That's why you get a fifth-round pick. Do you think that this deal ultimately was the expectation that you had of the compensation, that it would be a pick like this because the Commanders are taking on so much money?
I mean, first of all, for San Francisco, it's not even about cap space as much as it is more cash right now for them as well. But this was really something that we've talked about for well over a year, Ben, where we said this past season was really the final chance for the 49ers to win in this window with this core, which for so many years, making it to title games, making it to 2 Super Bowls, of course, losing this last Super Bowl in overtime to the Chiefs. And it's like they decided last year, they moved on from like Eric Armstead, but everybody else, we're going to run it back and we're going to try one more time because, of course, they also had the best bargain in all of football with Brock Purdy, but that changes this offseason when it's going to be time to pay Brock Purdy on a very, very big contract. And we mentioned last year Deebo Samuel's future, Javon Hargrave's future, Kyle Juszczyk's future. All that stuff is starting now. And they, of course, granted permission to Deebo Samuel to seek a trade. His agent, Tory Dandy, had a few teams interested, but no team was more interested than the Washington Commanders, who, of course, we saw what they did last year. Rookie quarterback Jaden Daniels, first-year head coach Dan Quinn making it to the NFC Championship game, and their general manager, Adam Peters, knows Deebo Samuel really well. He's one of the main people who helped draft Deebo Samuel when he was in San Francisco. He was there to see him when he became this wide receiver / running back being used in this very unique role, eventually seeing him request a trade and then, of course, get that contract extension. He was there for all of that. So he knows Deebo Samuel really well. And now he brings him in to this building in Washington because this is a team that, of course, has the rookie quarterback on that cheap contract and is able to build around him now with some expensive contracts. We saw them trade for Marshawn Lattimore during the season. Now they trade for Deebo Samuel. And still, even by doing all of that, they still have about $60 million in cap space, and they could definitely make some more by cutting some players or restructuring some contracts. So their roster before this trade, Terry McLaurin was really the only notable receiver that was still under contract. Luke McCaffrey is still there, who they drafted last year. But everyone else, De'Ami Brown, Noah Brown, Olamide Zaccheaus, like all these guys are going to become free agents. Zach Ertz also is scheduled to become a free agent. But the dynamic in Washington is just interesting with the way they're building the roster because last year we all said they need another receiver. There was talk about maybe they trade for Brandon Ayuk, the other 49ers receiver, bring in this younger receiver who has been with Jaden Daniels in the past when they were together in college. You look at what they have right now. Terry McLaurin is 30. Deebo Samuel just turned 29. Of course, they had Austin Eckler. They also have Brian Robertson, who's a little bit younger, but Zach Ertz, if they bring him back, is in his mid-30s. So a lot of these like veteran players, no one there who's going to be there for the next, I would say, 7-8 years, no matter what, of Jaden Daniels. But that is who they are going to be building around over here with Jaden Daniels and that dynamic. And this is really just the start of what should be a very busy offseason in Washington, where they try to continue to build off what they did last year. And as for San Francisco, they're still going to make some moves over here. Like we mentioned Juszczyk, we mentioned Javon Hargrave. They have some other tough decisions as well. Leonard Floyd, a couple of pass rushers that they signed last year, they could cut as well. They're going to make those decisions over here in the coming days and weeks. And it's really all because of that Brock Purdy contract that they have already started negotiating. And whenever it gets done, is expected to be at least $50 million per year.
Well, of course, Brock Purdy isn't the only contract that we're going to see change there in the NFC West. There was a real thought for a minute that we were going to see a big trade this weekend. And of course, the big trade ended up being Deebo Samuel. There was a lot of momentum. It seemed like Matthew Stafford could potentially be going to the Las Vegas Raiders. That all hit a back burner when it was announced that Stafford had agreed to a restructured deal with the Rams. The details aren't out yet, but I imagine this is going to be a healthy raise, right?
Details aren't out, but I could provide some of it. So the Raiders and Giants, who were the two most aggressive teams trying to trade for him, the Steelers were also involved, but not to that extent. They were willing to offer a multi-year deal with multiple years with full guarantees. Like they were willing to go that far to bring Matthew Stafford out of LA and into their facility, into their building, and become their quarterback. And there was significant interest there. Both those teams met with Jimmy Sexton, the agent in Indianapolis, and exchanged those numbers. And they were ready and willing to talk to the Rams about a potential trade compensation package. But on Friday morning, Matthew Stafford ended up having that meeting with the Rams brass. It was 6:30 local time. And they basically all agree that, yes, this has been a bit contentious at times. Yes, we have not necessarily respected you as much as we probably should have, but we all agree this is your best chance at winning. It's the best place for you in LA. You don't have to relocate your family and your four girls and everybody. Staying here is the best thing. And let's have cooler heads prevail. Now, he did not get the similar contract that the Raiders and Giants were offering. And officially, Ben, this has not been processed yet in the league with the PA and the official contract. But from my knowledge, this is going to be a 1-year deal with guarantees. That means they could be right back over here next year. I don't know if they touched that second year, which is still remaining on the contract. It might just still be the same way with not many guarantees in that second year. But this essentially is a 1-year raise. He was scheduled to make $27 million this year. That is going to go up, whether it's 40, 45, 50, whatever the number is. We're going to find out soon enough. But from my knowledge, that second year does not have that much significant guarantees, if any, at all. We're going to find out here very soon. But there's a chance over here where he plays this year, and eventually we're right back over here at this time next year, should he want to continue playing in the NFL next year. Of course, we know he's up there in age right now, but he could have gone to the Rams or to the Giants and could have pressed the Rams and told them, listen, I know you guys want me back, but you're not offering him much. I need more years. And if they would have said no, I think it would have been really, really awkward. But eventually everyone sat down and agreed this is it. And it does sound like he will be back on a deal that just gives him more money here in 2025, but doesn't sound like he got much over here in 2026. So it's a very interesting resolution. The timelines over here as well is one that I have to mention. The Rams have such a young roster, and a lot of these players are going to be coming up for extensions next year, whether it's Puka Nacua, and I know Kyron Williams is eligible right now, but they have a lot of these players on that defensive line, of course, who they drafted over the last couple of years, in the secondary, who they drafted over the last couple of years. And most of those players, there is no fifth-year option. Most of those guys were taken in rounds 2 through 7. Some of those guys were even undrafted players. So eventually they're going to need new contracts as well, which I believe is part of the reason why the Rams didn't want to touch 2026 money over here as well, because I do think they want to eventually transition into a younger person there at the quarterback position with a cheaper contract. So there are a lot of moving parts in all of this, but at the end of the day, I do believe everybody realized that it's the best case scenario to stay here in LA for Matthew Stafford. They agreed to that. We'll see how this season goes. But like I said, Ben, there is definitely that chance that we're right back over here in 2026.
Well, one guy they're not going to be back with in 2026 as far as when the negotiation goes is Alaric Jackson because they just agreed to a 3-year, $57 million deal with him. This takes one of the best guys that was going to be a free agent off the market. This has been a very, very tough go for teams that were targeting guys in free agency to be there in the offensive line. Now that you got him, you got Trey Smith, these guys are just disappearing. They're dropping like flies. So what do you think of the dollars and cents of this move for the Rams?
Yeah, so when you're a player like this and you're so close to free agency, you just want to make it to the market already. And if your team wants to retain you, you better give me a really good deal over here and make me now go to the open market. And Alaric Jackson, who has been starting there for the last couple of years, really cool story out of Iowa, former undrafted free agent. And again, one of those players who the Rams and that scouting staff, that personal department, they're able to find players everywhere. It's what makes them so special there in that scouting department. And they were able to find him as an undrafted free agent. And 3 years, $57 million. That is $19 million per year. He got over 30 of it guaranteed as well. And the key numbers over here, of course, are the $19 million APY, the guarantees as well, but also just 3 years, which essentially means after playing 2 years on this contract, he could be right back at the negotiating table asking for an extension. So I think that played a big role over here as well in order to take a deal right now and not have to go into that free agent market a week from now. So that played a big role over here, and they were able to retain him. And you're right, Ben. Trey Smith, of course, was franchise tagged. Alaric Jackson, of course, now gets re-signed in LA. Young offensive linemen who are actually really good players rarely make it to the free agent market. It's one of the toughest positions to find in the NFL is good offensive linemen. And these guys, they're just not making it there. And look at the guys who are available, who will be available at this time next week. Ronnie Stanley is probably the top offensive tackle. I could tell you right now, the Ravens have been working really hard on trying to get a deal done with him. They will have to do the same thing as Alaric Jackson and get a deal done before he becomes a free agent. After that, Cam Robinson, who was traded during the year, Jedrick Wills, the former first-round pick in Cleveland, Dan Moore, who was the starting left tackle in Pittsburgh. Those are the guys that we are talking about over here on the offensive tackle market. So those guys and their markets probably bump. But of course, I think it was a bit of a bummer for some teams over here to see Alaric Jackson come off the board a week before free agency.
Well, Aaron Rodgers is out with the Jets, but he may not have to leave New York. The Giants are reportedly intrigued by the thought of adding the veteran quarterback. The Giants currently don't have a quarterback on their roster, and they have the third pick in the draft, but third pick in the draft is only good if there's three quarterbacks. There's a very good chance that both those guys could be off, with the teams being the Tennessee Titans and the Cleveland Browns ahead of them. And that's without saying that a team could also move up and try to trade for that pick. More on that in a little bit. It seems like this would be a very boomer bust move there for Joe Shane and Brian Daboll, right, Ari?
This one is really interesting. There is some reality to it where at the beginning of Combine week, I remember getting some people who were saying, like, hey, Aaron Rodgers' camp has been reaching out to teams, and that includes the Giants. And I found that to be interesting, and I kind of back pocketed that for now. We didn't want to talk about it over here because we knew there was the Matthew Stafford pursuit by the New York Giants. And the number one option for the Giants this offseason, entering it when it came to the quarterback market, was Matthew Stafford. And they've been trying to get that done for a number of weeks, where they finally got that permission to speak to Jimmy Sexton. It was right after Super Bowl week, which is when the Rams gave him permission. They spoke to him and kept on speaking to him. And of course, we just spoke about Stafford, but that was really their number one option over here. But the Giants are going to add a veteran quarterback somewhere over here. They also want to draft a guy as well. They've done a lot of work on Cam Ward, on Shador Sanders, on Jackson Dart. They've done all the work. They would be open to trading up with the Tennessee Titans and number one, which we'll talk about over here in a minute. But the Giants also want to add a veteran quarterback. Right now, Tommy DeVito is the only quarterback under contract there, period. So they're going to have to add some names over here. But they've done their homework on Aaron Rodgers. They've done their homework on Sam Darnold. Last year, when Russell Wilson was released by the Broncos, before he took that meeting with the Steelers, he took a meeting with the Giants. I think there would be mutual interest there. So they're literally going to have every single stone over here where they're going to try to turn over and try to figure out who is the right guy over here. Because the reality for the New York Giants over here, Joe Shane, Brian Daboll enter this year on the hot seat. They just are. And they know that when a team has to put out a statement at the end of the year, which is what their owner, John Mara, did, announcing that I'm not going to fire these guys, I'm going to keep them. That is usually a message that I was considering it, but I'm going to keep you for now. So please prove that you could do better than this. So 3 wins last year, number 3 overall pick. Obviously, it's not good enough. So they will be checking on Aaron Rodgers, who officially they're allowed to talk to him right now. I know the Jets have not officially released him, but the Jets announcing that their intention of releasing him does give Aaron official permission to talk to other teams. I do know Aaron has been out of the country. I think Pat McAfee mentioned that as well. And I do believe McAfee also mentioned that Rodgers is scheduled to do a media appearance this week on the McAfee show. So he will speak for himself over here this week. But I'm sure Aaron would be glad to join a team like the Giants, join the other team over here in New York and try to prove the Jets wrong and basically tell them, listen, I played well enough last year. The coaching staff was a mess. The situation was a mess, and I could do better than this with the other team. So I think it's definitely possible over here. But like I said, the Giants are going to go through every single option over here. I don't know if I mentioned his name, but Sam Darnold as well is a name the Giants have been watching as well. So this one, they're literally going to be in on everybody.
Yeah, and like kind of like you hinted at, the Giants may not need Aaron Rodgers if they ultimately decide, you know what, we're going to move up. We want to get a quarterback. We're going to try to see if we can call the Tennessee Titans, which it seems like there's a few other teams also interested in doing so as well. If you were a betting man, Ari, do you think that the Titans still have the first overall pick when when they're on the clock and ultimately the selection's made? Is that going to be a Tennessee Titans pick or is it going to be somewhere else?
It's interesting. I don't think it's been reported yet, but the Titans are planning on on bringing in some of the top prospects into their building this week. That includes Shador Sanders, that includes Cam Ward, that includes Abdul Carter. They're going to bring in all of these players into their building this week. Now, I don't have an answer on whether the Titans want to trade their pick or not. And the reason for that is because when you look at this front office, this is a brand new front office with a bunch of new guys like Trad Brinker, who's their president of football operations. He's been there. There's a few other guys who have been there, but they just hired the new GM, Mike Borgonzi. They brought in Reggie McKenzie. They brought in Dave Ziegler. Like they've brought in so many new faces into that front office where they're still trying to get to know each other and try to understand each other's philosophies and also try to understand this coaching staff, which they're inheriting with Brian Callahan, with all those people, and what type of player that they want to have. So I don't think the Titans have decided yet what they want to do with that pick. I know they've mentioned, I think Brinker is the one who said it, that we're going to draft a player who's a generational talent. And of course, there are a few generational talents in this draft, whether it's Travis Hunter. I mean, Abdul, the pass rusher for Penn State. I think a lot of people look at him as a really, really elite pass rusher who could make an impact right away. So there are some really, really impressive players in this draft. But this Titans front office, they're still trying to get to know each other. So I don't think they're still ready to pull the trigger right now on a trade. So unlike when the Bears traded out of number 1 a couple of years ago, or when the Titans in 2016, these Titans traded out of number 1 to the Rams back then, this is a little bit different over here. This is a bit of a new front office that's really trying to do all their scouting work right now, put all of their scouting writing together and try to figure out what their philosophies are before making any sort of decision on what they're going to do and whether they're going to keep the pick or move on from the pick.
Well, it appears the Cowboys are going to be keeping one of the top free agents on the board with the report that they will be placing the franchise tag on defensive tackle Osa Odighizuwa if they cannot come to a contract extension before the deadline. Another top free agent could be off the boards here. What do you think about the whole deal there going on in Dallas?
Yeah, I'm going to be watching this one really closely. Of course, the franchise tag deadline to place a tag is on Tuesday, tomorrow. But this one is interesting because Osa Odighizuwa, just for people who don't know, has been a really, really underrated player for the Cowboys. Last 3 years, every single year, I started all 17 regular season games. Very durable, very disruptive down there in the middle of the Cowboys defense. And from the NFL Combine in Indianapolis, I always love asking this question to executives. Who are some players that we're not ready for who are going to get a crazy contract in free agency? Osa was one of those names who people were like, if he makes it there, the money is going to be insane. And I think the Cowboys have realized that. And over this last week, they've been trying really hard to get an extension done over here. Now, the franchise tag for his position is $25.1 million. That's a very, very hefty amount over here. I do know they've been negotiating a contract that will pay him over $20 million per year. But if they go in the tag direction and put $25.1 million on him, the question really becomes over here, does the Odigizua camp now reset contract talks and basically tell the Cowboys, we're not doing any extension that does not start with at least $25.1 million per year? Usually, whenever you get tagged, that tag number is the starting point for where an extension is supposed to be on the average per year. Right now, where the negotiations are at, it is a little bit less than that. And they've also been haggling over 4 years or 5 years. It's been a whole discussion over here. But if you were to make it to the open market, he would probably get very close to that $25 million per year. But I don't think the Cowboys are ready to go there with that number, of course, as well as the fact that they also have to pay Micah Parsons over here at some point this offseason, and trying to save as much as possible is obviously going to be very, very helpful in this situation. So this one is fascinating. I'm not saying the report is not true. I could definitely see them tagging over here. But if they tag him, would the Odigizua camp be okay with continuing negotiations with where the numbers were before? Because when the tag was created, people who don't know, the idea of it was for it to be a stopgap and give you more time to eventually do an extension. Are they actually going to treat it like that over here? Or are they going to use it as you're tagging him at this number when we have to restart all the negotiations again? So that is the one to watch over here. I do know it's going to go all the way down over here to the wire. They're negotiating literally as we speak right now. And whether they get that deal done, it's truly going to be a buzzer beater over here on Tuesday before that tag deadline. We've seen Trey Smith get tagged. T. Higgins and the Bengals are also still talking. That could be also a deadline type of a deal over here before he gets tied for a second straight year. Probably the other one that's probably the most notable one and interesting one is Sam Darnold in Minnesota. If they're going to tag him at $40 million, I would be surprised. But this tag deadline has definitely gotten way more interesting than we expected.
Finally, there's rumors swirling around Seahawks star wide receiver DK Metcalf and that he is potentially available in a trade. He has been connected to the Green Bay Packers and potentially some other spots. There's a lot of rumors swirling around. Like, what are you making of what's going on out there with these rumors, and how real is it that they could potentially be moving him?
So there were a bunch of rumors out there. The Packers and the Seahawks have a framework of a deal. That is not true. They have not really had any discussions on that. But 2 Tuesdays ago, we did our special edition of the NFL Spotlight Show talking about roster cut candidates here in the coming weeks. And we mentioned Tyler Lockett in Seattle. He's a true cut candidate. I also mentioned when I said Tyler Lockett, there have been rumors for a number of months now, dating back to the trade deadline, that something is up with DK Metcalf there in Seattle. I said keep an eye on it. Now, John Schneider, their GM at the NFL Combine in Indianapolis, downplayed it. So did Mike McDonald, their head coach. This Packer stuff is definitely not necessarily true, but I'm definitely keeping an eye on it over here over these next few weeks over here, just to see if it for sure dies down. The Seahawks have to do an extension with Geno Smith, which is getting worked out, or they're trying to work it out. They also have to do something with DK Metcalf, who also does not have any guaranteed money left. So do they try to extend him? To this point, I've not heard much talks over there. Will they be willing to discuss a potential trade over there? That is one that is truly up in the air. I doubt it. I truly do. I think there's a better chance that something happens to Tyler Lockett. Jackson Smith and Jigba, of course, moves up over there. And of course, they keep DK Metcalf as well. But this is one that in league circles, at least, it's been out there for the last couple of months. And it doesn't surprise me that now you're getting all these rumblings all of a sudden coming out. But to this point, I've not heard anything that is for sure factual and true. If there was something, we will definitely cover it over here on NFL Spotlight in the future.
All right, guys, you survived the first episode of YouTube with us. I think it went all right. I think we got some nice little technical stuff going on here. We're working through it as I produce and type all the buttons and talk. It's been fun. So biggest thing for us is we need you guys to subscribe. If you're watching, you're listening right now, go hit the button. It helps us out a lot. You don't have to listen every day. You should, but you don't have to listen every day. just hit the subscribe. Just subscribe. It's great. It's easy. Hit the bell. Turn on notifications. That's all I got, Ari.
First of all, I think they should listen every day, Ben. That's a bad thing to say, but yes,
Yeah,
they
yeah,
should
yeah, yeah.
listen. Yeah, but subscribe also. Subscribe also. That would be great. But yeah, pretty successful first show over here on YouTube. There's no better time for us to start the YouTube channel than right now with the off season, which is my regular season, officially in full force. It's only going to get hotter and hotter. We are heating up around the NFL. A lot of back channel discussions going on right now. There's going to be plenty of cuts this week, some more trade agreements. No trades could become official until March 12th, but there will be more over here in the coming days. And of course, officially free agency starts 1 week from today with the legal tampering period. As always, rate, review, subscribe, Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube. Watch us on X every single Tuesday. We're going to have the official announcement of what we have coming out tomorrow, coming out on my X page later today. So be on the lookout for that. And we will be back here tomorrow morning on YouTube, on your podcast feeds, and on X with our Tuesday edition of the NFL Spotlight Show. We will see you all then.